What? Yichud v'inyan yishus. So, okay, so the past few weeks we began discussing various halachas that pertain to the workplace. We spoke about brokerage, halachas of brokerage. We spoke about how halacha views Okay, so the past few weeks, we began discussing various topics that pertain to business halacha. We started with brokerage, then we went to how halacha views common business practice, its weight, its strength, its various powers and accolades. We're starting from page number 8. This week, I want to begin, which will cover 4 weeks. In the course of 4 weeks, we're going to cover various halachas of yichud, halachas that pertain to the workplace between male and female relations, getting along, shaking hands, being alone in an office, having a meeting, giving someone a ride. And this week in particular, I want to address 2 shilas. One, the nature, or really 3 shilas. One, what is the nature of the Isra of Yichud? Is it a deraisa? Is it a derabanan? Is it less than that? Number 2, really 2 practical cases. Very often, this is a case that comes up in almost on a daily basis. You'll have a therapist, you'll have a frum therapist, and they'll see a client. Is that a problem of yichud? Can a male therapist only see a male client? Can a female therapist only see a female client? And it's even more relevant and more pertinent to, let's say, the frum community outside of Obamics, but every woman's a speech therapist, a physical therapist. And what is halachas of yichud pertaining to that? We know that yichud with a non-Jewish male starts to the age 9. So can she not practice on even a child? Is that an issue for a therapist? So in order to answer those shilas, and in general, what's the guy? Can you have a meeting with a female client, with a female employee? You call her into your office. What's the way of going about that? Is that a problem? Is that an isser of yichud? So we have to first establish what is the yichud, the isser of yichud. So we're going to discuss that. What is the isser of yichud? When does it apply? Who does it apply to? Under what context and what circumstances? So the main course of this week is we're going to speak about, is it an isser deraisa or derabanan? And we're going to bring in one case where yichud doesn't apply, one remedy to yichud, and then the next 2 weeks we'll think about various other remedies to the isser of yichud. So the best place to start is the Mishnah Masechet Kiddushin on the Afei Amud Beis. The Mishnah is assuming that a yichud between one man and one woman is asur. Then the Mishnah says, "Lo yifyachid adam im shnei nashim." Now it's not only one man and one woman, but the isur also applies to one man and 2 women. But one woman could be alone with 2 men. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon said, "Af ish echad misyachad im shnei nashim." Rabbi Shimon's of the opinion it's not only that one woman can be alone with 2 men, it could be one man alone with 2 women. The isur is solely one man with 1 woman. Bisman she'ishtei imay, the Mishnah already gives a remedy. The Mishnah says when his wife is with him, he can be misyached v'yashin imay, bisman she'ishtei ichroi, v'yashin imam b'pudiptim impnei she'ishtei mishtameres misyachedes adam im imay v'im bitay. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says that when he's with his wife, he can be mityached with another woman as well, and they can even sleep in the same hotel together. And a person is allowed to be mityached with his mother and with his daughter, and they're allowed to sleep in the same bed while they touch. But when this daughter gets older, but when they grow up, when the child is of age, either the mother should start, wear pajamas, or the child, whatever, or if it's the father, they should start with clothing. But before that, it's completely fine to sleep in the same bed together, even if they're touching. So my timer, the Gemara immediately asks, why do we find this distinction between a man and a woman? that one man is not allowed to be nisyachid with two women, and one woman's allowed to be nisyachid with two men. So Rav Shimon, Tana de Yo, the noshim daitis kalis alayan. Noshim daitis kalis. Rashi says it would be easier for him to seduce both of them or seduce one of them. The other one, wouldn't have a problem with it for various reasons that the Gemara says. Rashi says, the Mefarshim say, either she knows that she would do the same, or you would have the power of seduction over both of them. So, Mino Hani Mili, where do I know this Isser of Yichud, the Gemara asks? Amar of Yechon, Mishum of Yishmo, Yechon in the name of Yishmo, Remez Yichud min Atar Minayin. Where do I find a Remez for the Isser of Yichud min Torah? So automatically, when the Torah says Remez, where is it hinted? That implies that this is not a deraisa. If I'm looking for a hint, for an indication of an Isser, that means it's not clearly expressed, not clearly stated. So it wouldn't be deraisa, it wouldn't be min Torah. There are exceptions to that principle, but automatically the Gemara indicates that this is Gzeir D'Rabbanan. The Tanoi made a Gzeira, there's the Gemara, Tanoi bring a din, and we want to know where is it hinted to in the Torah. The Gemara brings a very, very peculiar drasha. Gemara seems to pull this one out of its hat. Shenemar, because it says, Ki yasicha achicha beni mecha. The Torah tells us about regarding a massive, somebody that coerces somebody else to do avodah zarah. So the Torah uses that when your brother from your mother convinces you to do an avera. So the Gemara says, why does it have to say v'chi beni mecha? Why does it have to say your brother from your mother? Superfluous, really. V'chi ben emesis ben ave emesis is the only person that's going to get you to do an avera is your brother from your mother, not from your father. Why does the Torah say beni mecha? So the Gemara says something very wild. It's to teach us ben misyachid im imay. A son could be misyachid with his mother. The Torah is telling us that it's only mutter to be misyachid with your mother, not anybody else. So the Gemara seems to create this drasha out of nowhere, to the extent that the Pnei Yeshua says for 30 years he was perplexed by this text. He was perplexed by this drasha. Where does it come from? And finally, he writes in his Shuvah, it came to me. I was sitting, and the beer in the Gemara came to me. It says, what's pshat? He says, in order for someone to be maced to someone, if I'm going to convince you to do an avodah zarah, it has to be that we were alone together. It has to be that we were in isolation, and I was able, in that course of the said isolation, convince you to do something wrong. So when the Gemara refers to people you're in isolation with, it speaks about all your relatives. It speaks about your brother, your mother. But if you look at the pasuk in its context later mentions the father, mentions other people, but it doesn't mention a sister. It only mentions those relatives. So for the fact that the Torah omits a sister, it means that you're not allowed to be alone with your sister, because you would never. Meaning, we're not talking about a person that's over averis. We're talking about a person that follows halacha, and they would be in a case of isolation, and then they would be convinced. So the fact that the Torah doesn't give us a case where you're alone with your sister, means that you're not allowed to be alone with your sister. And if you're not allowed to be alone with your sister, so too all arayas. The problem with this Pnei Yeshua is that there's no Isser Yichud with one sister. There's no Isser Yichud. So how can he say that the Gemara make the drasha because it didn't mention the sister? It's there, I know, everybody like your sister, but there's no Isser with your sister. So you can explain it according to Rogachover. We'll see later on the sister, even though there's no Isser Yichud, but one's not allowed to live with their sister. You can't rent an apartment together with your sister. You could be alone with them, the duration of time, hopefully we'll discuss in future weeks, but even though there's no Isser Yichud, but you're not allowed to live, you're not allowed to learn together, you're not allowed to live together. And the Rogachover is of the opinion that this is the Raisa of Yichud is only when you live together, it's not when you're alone for a few minutes. So maybe that's the Pshat of Pnei Yeshua. But either way, the Gemara, the Limud seems to be, an extravagant one, seems to be pulled out of nowhere. So it's very clear from this Gemara, even though we found the pasuk where we made a drasha, from the fact that it's Remez ben Atar, the pasuk uses it, where's there a hint to it, and the drasha is a bit of a stretch, if you will. There's the Rabbanon. We find, though, when you turn to page 9, there's a Gemara Mitzvah Avodah Zarah in Aflam and Vav days. The Gemara Avodah Zarah in Aflam and days, in its course of relating the various takanas that were issued by by Beishamai, Beis Hillel. Right, the ones we're most familiar with is Stam Yenon, is Chalav Tas Akum. And one of the gezeres that the Gemara says is that they were also bitam. They were geyser that one shouldn't be able to take the daughter of a non-Jew. The Gemara says that's a gezer b'shama v'hillel. It's not a gezer b'shama v'hillel. That's a pasuk. When you can't marry a non-Jew, you can't live with a non-Jew. The Gemara says no. It's talking about yichud. In the course of that, the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says yichud avodas koichavim. Like, meaning before the Gemara relates the various ways that the Isra of Yichud was developed, that Beis Dinu Shal Hashmonai were geyser. Beis Dinu Shal David was geyser Yichud with a Bas Yisrael, and Hillel the Shammai came and were geyser Yichud with a guy. The Gemara in the course of that says, how can we say that David was geyser on Yichud Bas Yisrael? Yichud Bas Yisrael Da'Raisu. It's an Isra Min HaTorah. So how could David make a gezerah? It's already pre-existing Da'Raisa. The Gemara says, Min HaTorah, the Ish is only Ish. David was geyser al Pnuyas. David was geyser al Pnuyas because there wouldn't be an Isser Erva. They're not one of the Arayas because we're assuming that she goes to the mitzvah. There's no Erva of Nida. If she's a Pnuya, if he wanted to, he could turn and marry her at the moment and they could be together. So that's why, Min HaTorah, there's no Isser. David had to come along and make a Gezerah, and Beis Hillel with Beishamai extended that to include non-Jewish women. The Gemara in Sanhedrin speaks regarding what about, it's very clear that what about it's a woman that's a Nida, that's also an Araba, it's also an Isra Min HaTorah to be together. So Gemara in Sanhedrin learns out from a pasuk in Shir Hashirim that Suga B'Sheshanim, that when it speaks about the roses, the Gemara is darshan from the psukim there, that, since yes, Pas Basali, they've been together, they have a relationship, she knows she'll be with her eventually, the Torah allows yichud. Right, we allow yichud, we learn that it's a yichud. So if we just look at these texts regarding what they tell us about the status of the Yisr, the nature of the Yisr, we have the Gemara in Kushin that seems to indicate it's Rabbanon, that uses Remez, and the Drasha isn't that strong. Then we have the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, which clearly terms certain times Yichud is Deraisa. And from the fact the Gemara in Sanhedrin learns out a Heter to Yichud, that it doesn't include an Isha Nida. It doesn't include an Isha Nida from a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, which is a pasuk in Nach, right? It wouldn't have the weight. You can't bring a pasuk from Nevi'im to tell me that an Isra Min HaTorah is mutter. There's no, right? So if the pasuk in Nach plays relevance to it, it must be that it's not Deraisa. And that's how the Rambam paskin. The Rambam says, Asr lis yachid im erba min ha'arayas, ben skena, ben yol, yolad shadavers that goyim legalis erba chutz me'aim, im benav, ha'av, im bitoy, va'abal, im ishtay nida. Right? You're not allowed to have yichud like the context we mentioned, but it is mutter when the Mishnah said a father with his daughter, a son with his mother, and then a husband with his wife when she's a nida. The Rambam goes on to say, she's not nida, of course they could have yichud. The question is, when she's a nida, she's assertive. This is chorus, right? So we mentioned the Gemara in Sanhedrin wants to know, is there an Isra Yichud in such a case? Is there an Isra Yichud in such a case? Meaning we said you can't be in this Yachid with somebody, a woman that's usher to you. Your wife's also usher for you when you need a. How are you allowed to be in this Yachid with her? So the Gemara says, you didn't hear? We explained, we said that. Okay. We said that we don't have to Pasuk in Shir Hashirim. The Yemenites fly. Certain Fardim, I think Yemenites had certain Yemenites had a minute that they would move to a different house, if that's really what you're looking for. But the Gemara says it's not a problem. So the Rambam, when he's referring to this Isser Yichud, he says that the Ikar Adin, there's no Isser Yichud with one man with another woman, with another man. There's no Isser Yichud between two men, or between a man and an animal, even though those are both ervas, those are both chiyuv, because we don't suspect people of being over, those are errors. But he says, I'm very confused. No. Mendy, were you here the whole time? We quoted page 10. Look at page 10. We quoted that Gemara. The Gemara says that there is no Isser Yichud by Ishtay Nida. The Gemara learned it out from a pasuk. I understand your question. Your question is, why by other people, right? What's your question? Why is it not mutter for other women? Because the Gemara said it's different because they've been together already. She knows that she will be mutter to him in a matter of weeks. That's why even if they're married but they haven't been together, chupas nida, right? They have to sleep separately. There isn't a serve yichud. What's mattered is that he knows the relationship is there. The Rambam goes on to say that me'ikar adin there's no isur yichud. The Rambam continues to say that me'ikar adin there's no isur yichud with two men. Two men, we're not choshev that something will happen, or a man with an animal, we're not choshev that something will happen. When he says gedolei hachachamim, we're mashbid not to be alone with another man, and not to be home alone with a dog, not to be home alone with an animal. The Shulchan Aruch, when he quotes this din in Siman Chav Beis, he says that nowadays the Mechaber is writing in the 16th century. He says nowadays any bar beilev, anybody with a certain chachma, will not be nisyachah with a man and not be nisyachah with an animal. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. And to the extent the Frierdiker Rebbe was very famous, there's a letter the Frierdiker Rebbe did not want two bachim to share a dorm room. Frierdiker Rebbe wanted there should be more than two bachim in the same dorm room. But the Rambam continues, says, V'isur yichud harayis mipiyah Kabbalah. But the Rambam says very clearly that it's not min HaTorah, it's mipiyah Kabbalah. It's an ancient din, but it's not biblical. The Maggid Mishnah, quoting the Baalei Tosfos, if you look on the side of page 11, refers to it as an isur deraisa. So that's going to have big nafkaminas. If we view it as a deraisa derabanan, there are various principles to how to deal with the deraisa derabanan, but they're a lot more apparent when you're dealing with a derabanan. If you say it's a deraisa, it brings a much bigger shaila. So what's the extent of this deraisa? So I have two sources on page 12 and page 13. We'll speak them out. To describe what the extent of the deraisa is. The Chavas Yair, Rabbi Yair Bachrach, says that even if I'm going to say it's an Issa Deraisa, it's only one man and one woman. Yeah, I said page 11. I said page 12. I said page 12 and page 13. So he says that it's only Deraisa when it's one man and one woman. But when it's multiple women with one man, two men with one woman, then it's for sure only the Rabbanon. In Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber quotes the Yisurim that we mentioned. Also, Lisyachadim Erva Me'erayis, Ben Zikena, Ben Yilada, Shadavar Zagorim Megalis Erva, Chutz Me'aim, Im Bna, Va'av, Im Bitoy, Va'abalim Ishtay Nida. Brother and sister, we also discussed in the beginning of the shir. Brother and sister, yes. So brother and sister, they're allowed to be alone together, but they can't rent an apartment together. They can't live together permanently. That's what we said. Not permanently, it's okay. What means permanent, what means not permanent, we're going to discuss in future weeks. So now, the Beis yeah. So the Beis Shmuel says that the Raisa is not only, for cases where there's an erva, where there's a chi of kares or a chi of misa. There's also an isur deraisa. There's also an isur deraisa for a kohen to be with a grusha, and any other isur that's only an isur malchus is also an isur deraisa. Correct. What do you mean? There's an isur yichud for a kohen to be with a grusha. For them to live together. Correct. Correct. So the question is, when we say yichud min haTorah, what is yichud? What is yichud min haTorah? It's only when there's a chi of misa. It's only with me, you with somebody else's wife, ish, where there's a chi of misa, or somebody with an erva that's, or another woman that's a nida that's a chi of kares, or also malchus. So the Beis Shmuel tells us it's also when there was only a malchus. Anytime the relationship is also min haTorah, there's an isur yichud min haTorah. Doesn't matter the punishment. So based on that, if you turn to page 15, we can understand this a little lumdus. Minchas Chinuch says he wants to understand now why does the Rambam view it as an isur d'Rabbanan and the Bali HaTosfos say yichud is only isur d'Oraisa. Says it's based off the following. We saw that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, we saw the Gemara on page 9 and the Gemara in Avodah Zarah told us that an isur yichud with a pnuya, with an unmarried woman, is only a gzeira of David HaMelech. Meaning, the Raisa, it's mutter for them to be alone together. So the Minchas Chinuch has the following chaf. The Minchas Chinuch brings as a machlokes, what is the nature of an isur for somebody to live together with an unmarried woman that's not a nida? So Tosfos holds, it doesn't matter. Why does it matter? He's not married. Let's say he's not married to you. No, they're not. He's not nischab and shame kedusha. Okay, so we'll speak about this. So the opinion of the Balei Tosfos is that it's completely mutter for somebody to live together min haTorah with a woman that's not a nida, without any kedushin. As long as she's not a nida, they can be together. The Rambam holds that it's isur deraisa. The Rambam holds it's an isur deraisa. So if that's the case, the Minchas Chinuch says, Tosfos, if I hold that no matter what, as long as it's min haTorah, there's an isur yichud min haTorah, the Rambam can hold it's min haTorah. Why not? Because we see that they extended the isur yichud to something that's already isur min deraisa. It's already usher for him to be together with a pnuya, and they had to extend the yichud. So that means that there's no isur min haTorah. It means that it was born out of extension. It was born out of necessity. Because if it was a straight up isur deraisa, it would have said deraisa, as opposed to Balei Tosfos that hold that it's mutter. Therefore, there's no isur min haTorah, so there's no yichud min haTorah. So David HaMelech had to come along and make a gzeira yichud, but it's a pnuya. That's a Minchas Chinuch. A beautiful time in this from Minchas Chinuch. Makes sense. What? No. What do you mean? No. Tosfos holds up. It doesn't hold like the Rambam. You're saying, yeah, that's so. What about money? Yeah. So what about so he said that we brought the Gemara that it's also Asur Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. I didn't turn yet, but I'm going to turn to page 16. Before we get to page 16, I'm going to introduce bring up something that we mentioned. So we brought that Beis Shammai Beis Hillel were geyser that there's an isur yichud between a Jew and a non-Jewish woman. Now, what about a Jewish woman with a non-Jewish man? So on page 16, I quote, you have the Ramah and the Gra. The Ramah says, Isha haragila b'lis yachid in kusim nikra iveres al hadas. She's termed iveres al hadas. She's going against the religion. The Ramah, page 16. The middle of the page, you see the gray? Yes, on the right side. Sorry. And now, if you look in the Gra on the left side, the Gra says this is Minat Torah. So the Gra is saying, for a Jewish man to be with a non-Jewish woman is only your Rabbanon. For a Jewish woman to be with a non-Jewish man is an Issa Deraisa. Why that is the case? That it's broader for a different time. What? They're not Goyish children, but we're more suspect of the non-Jewish man than we are suspect of the non-Jewish woman. So it makes it deraisa. So what? Yeah. No, two women can't be with one man. One. We'll discuss it, but I don't believe it is. We'll discuss, which women help, which women don't help, but as it stands, it's not a problem with yichud. Now, are there any remedies for yichud? Somebody has to. At the end of the day, you have to call your employee in for a meeting. At the end of the day, you have to see this patient. Are there any remedies for yichud? And today we're going to present one, and then over the course of the week, we'll discuss other possibilities. The Gemara in Kedusha, the Pei Aleph, says on page 17 that when the door is open, so we're going to discuss that. This is Gemara. The Gemara says, when is it? Men with woman, guy, only the Rabbana. Men with a man that's a guy, is an Isderaisa. The Mahavdel, so we said because we're more suspect, we're choshed more of a non-Jewish man, that he is going to do something than we are with a non-Jewish woman. Why would it be a bigger problem? Meaning, wouldn't it be better if the child is Jewish than if the child's non-Jewish? Could be.
Why do I care that this is suspicious? Why is it relevant to the fact that if it's also so you can wait, you can be a father. You can be a father. That's it. What's the difference? I don't understand. That's true, right? I'm making the going or you making the that's true, regardless, right?
So we saw that there are different levels of the right to the Rabbanon are also totally in how suspect we are, right? We said it, one man with two women is Aser Ichud, and it would be Aser Min HaTorah, but it's still the Ichud is only the Rabbanon, right? Because we're not, the Chachamim extended the Isser that they're more kosher. They're still suspect with two women. So what happened is, maybe Min HaTorah, we're not kosher so much. A man would want to be with a non-Jewish woman. We're speaking about, from a Yidden. But because Chachamim, were suspect more, they extended it to even there. We found that even when there's an issue in the relationship, certain circumstances would make it only a Drabana. So there's an opinion that this is one of the cases. So, yeah. So yeah, there's a whole question how Esther was able to be married to Achashverosh willingly, right? Esther goes to Achashverosh willingly, right? So that's a whole share in itself. But Esther, after 3 days of fasting, goes to Achashverosh voluntarily. Before that, she's always summoned, so it wasn't her choice. She was raped. This is her voluntarily putting herself in a situation. And the Gemara very much learns out that Esther did what we call an Avera Lishma. She did something that was wrong, it's an Avera, but there's this redeeming factor that she did it to save Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says she was offered her out. No, we said, whatever, fine. But that's the whole shir itself, what Esther's status was, how Esther was allowed to do it. No, we say aber lishma. Whatever. So the Gemara says that when there's a Pesach Pasuach l'Rishus Harabim ain't Choishish Mishum Yichud. When there's a door open to Rishus Harabim, when it's the space is open to Rishus Harabim, we're not Choishish for Yichud, because then it's no longer a secluded space. Yichud is by nature when they're Yichud, when they are alone. If the door's open, then they're not alone. Therefore, there's no problem. If you look at page 18, that's how it's paskin in Shulchan Aruch, that when the door is open, it's fine. The Piskei Tshuva brings that it's only when it's within reason to assume that someone else would walk into the room. You know, it has to be that there are other people. It has to be Rosh Hashanah. It has to be that there are people going through a thoroughfare. So what constitutes a thoroughfare? What constitutes people walking by? So the Piskei Tshuva also brings down that the Chachmas Adam, the Chai Adam, and the Sefer Chachmas Adam isn't sure. He thinks maybe only 3 people. Let's say you live in an apartment building and there are 4 apartments on your floor, and there are 3 other rooms. If you leave your door open, even if there are only 3 people that can walk by, maybe that's enough. But he says Sarachiyun. But the fact that his question, his doubt, is when there's only 3 people. If you're in an office with 10, 15 people, that wouldn't be a problem. So the question is now, I want to discuss briefly, quickly, what constitutes a door being open? Does it have to be open? Does it have to be ajar? Does it have to be closed but not locked? Many times you're having a meeting, you don't want the door open. You don't want people overhearing. But also you have to get around. Maybe this problem of yichud. We have a Rashba. The Rashba seems to clearly say that if the door, on page 19, that if the door was closed but not locked, he brings in Yerushalmi that it's not a problem. Closed means that nobody else can enter. As long as somebody can walk in at any time, we assume that they'd be suspect, and we view that as enough of a boundary for them not to be over the issue of yichud. So we'll discuss. We'll see soon. Would help. Why not? What? Okay, but let's say it's a window. You're on your office. Your office is on the office floor. Many employers either have a glass office or have a window or a car. Well, a car might be a little different, but let's say, for argument's sake, let's say a car. Can you give someone a ride? I'm going, let's say, I don't know, I'm going downtown. Can I give somebody a ride? Is that a problem? We're in a closed door, it's locked, but everybody can see in. Giving babysitters a ride home. So we'll discuss, there are other issues of the car, mainly that, a car is not, you can always just bring the car somewhere secluded, but that's a different topic. But people can look in, it's no longer private. That's the question, We're in a room together, but it's not private. So we'll bring that up. Rabbi Akiva Eger, in a series of tshuvas with the base mayor on page 20, says that there's a misreading in the Rashba. The Rashba really doesn't mean to say that if the door is closed but it's not locked, it's a problem. He means to say if the door is closed but not locked, it is a problem. He rereads the Rashba. He says he puts punctuation in other places, and he says that obviously if the room's closed, if there's a secluded place, then it's a problem. So page 21, where the next page 21, which is the Radvaz, Rav David ben Zimra, the Rebbe of the Arizal and Nigla, Rebbe of Cairo, later Yerushalayim, later Tzas. He really, for Windows, is really where you find the sugya for him. He writes, it's been a long time, people have been asking me about Yichud. I want to be Masak in my opinions. So he says, Yichud means that you're secluded. It doesn't mean you have to be in your own room. If you're in a dark corner, secluded, Yichud. We repeated many things of the shir for many reasons. So he says, even if it's one big room, let's say it's a stadium. You have a giant, for argument's sake, it's a stadium. It's one room with other people, but you can go to a corner. Nobody will see you. You can go under the bleachers. You can do whatever you want. Nobody will see. Nobody will know. That's still yichud. You don't need 4 walls and a door to make a yichud. He also says, and for that reason, just because there are 4 walls and a door doesn't mean it's a problem. If people will walk into the room, then there's no problem. It really depends on the situation you're in. If you can be suspect within reason that people will see you, it's a problem. If it's beyond the scope of reason that people will see you, people will come across what you're doing, then it is a problem. Okay. So how do we paskin? How do we view really a closed door meeting? A closed door meeting, the office, the door is not locked, but it's open and there's no window. For whatever reason, this employer, it's an older office building, there's no window, it's not glass. Calling a female employee in or being called in by a female employer. Is that a problem? So the Chazon Ish is quoted in Dvar Halacha on page 25 and 26, where he said that if the door is not locked, it's not a problem. Even the case that they gave him was one where it was really outside of the scope of reason that someone would come in. The woman lived the end of the apartment block. The door didn't lead out to Rosh Hashanah. He said, as long as it's not locked, there's always that little bit of fear that, somebody could walk in, and it's not a problem. That's Rav Moshe's opinion. That's the Chazon Ish's opinion. That's how the Chazon Ish paskin. So how did an American place can view it? How did an American place can view it? Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky ruled that really there's no machlokas between the Rashba, the Chazon Ish, and the Akiva Eiger. The Chazon Ish is talking about Eretz Yisrael. The door is closed, it doesn't mean anything. You see a closed door, you walk in no matter what. There's no privacy. Israelis walking no matter what. There's no sense of security that your door is closed unless it's locked. Americans, the door is closed. You don't walk in. Manners, you knock, you wait to be called in, then it's a problem. Meaning, if you're in an area that's a closed door, I'll open a closed door. I know my kids are home. My kids don't care. Whatever. For argument, the people don't care. My neighbor comes over whenever she wants. Whatever he wants. Whatever the case is. It's not a problem. Therefore, no issue. If you have someone that's, privacy, for whatever reason, thinks that you have a right to privacy, for whatever reason they've got that in their head, then it is a problem. Appreciate it. One of the poskim of New Haven. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, the America. Rav Moshe Feinstein extends this even further. Rav Moshe Feinstein says, I'm about to turn the page. Page 28. Rav Moshe Feinstein says a very big chiddush. Rav Moshe says you can even have, let's say you're in a meeting and for whatever reason the door is locked. For whatever reason you feel the need to lock the door, or you're with someone and the front door is locked. Rav Moshe says it's not a problem because even though Americans are very polite, not before, but they expect an answer. If you're in an office and somebody knocks on the employer's door, and you're in a situation that you always will have to respond. People know you're in the room. You're going to have to say, give me a minute or come in. You will have to respond no matter what. You have to be cognizant and be able to respond appropriately. Then it's not a problem. We don't need them physically being able to walk in, but we need what? Okay. Rav Moshe thought, that he wouldn't be in the mindset to respond. So Rav Moshe says if somebody is in an office setting that they would constantly have to respond to somebody knocking on the door, they have to issue some form of response, audible, whatever, then it's not a problem. Okay, so in summary, a lot of these times the poskim, based on if we rely on the Chazon Ish, if we take Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, if we take Rav Moshe, it's really going to be totally on the case, the scenario. If it's like we mentioned, there's various levels. There's the Raisa, the Rabbanan, Hakana, and it'll be totally on who you're being the Yisur Yichud with. But for the most part, let's say a window, somebody be able to see, and that usually solves the problem. Okay, but as Hashem, next week we'll discuss other scenarios other cases that would be a remedy even if you can't meet those metrics.
You're still recording over here by the phone? Whose phone is it? Still recording? Is your phone recording? What?